What a difference a few months, a fiscal framework, and a tax reform can make. When Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's government took office on January the 1st, financial markets greeted it with a snarl. But after 6 months of Lula, they've come around a bit. I'm Gustavo Ribeiro, editor in chief of the Brazilian Report, and this week we're going to talk about Finance Minister Fernando Haddad's newfound street cred, Wall Street cred. As usually happens when we're talking about the Brazilian economy, I'm joined this week by Deputy Editor Fabiane Ziolla Menezes, directly from Curitiba. Hi, Fabi, how are you?
Hi, Gustavo. Great to be here.
So before we get into this week's discussion, I'd like to ask our viewers to subscribe to the Brazilian Report, which is the journalistic engine behind our podcast, our videos, and social media. Because what you see on these channels are just a tiny fraction of all the content that we produce with sharp, independent, and impactful analysis and reporting. Our newsroom has broken major scoops as of lately, such as the plot to hack Brazil's chief electoral justice, which is still unraveling major crises in Brazil, and the massive diplomatic operation to solve a semiconductor shortage that would equip Brazil's voting machines ahead of the contested 2022 elections. So if you want to contribute to independent journalism with an emphasis on independent, you should subscribe to our content. And if you have already, check out our Buy Me a Coffee fan page and donate a cup of coffee to our reporters. You can also join a Buy Me a Coffee community to get exclusive access to behind the scenes content on how we make our journalism and stories about Brazilian culture and society. You can also get a shout out with your name on our Explaining Brazil podcast. So you should go to buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report or flash the QR code on our screen right next to Fabiane's face. So please go ahead, subscribe to the Brazilian Report, buy us some cups of coffee. Now back to the show, Fabi. When Fernando Haddad was named finance minister in December, uh, how was he received by the markets?
Yes, so he was announced at early December, right? I think in the first week of December. And well, since the election campaign, Lula had been saying that he would choose someone with good communication, with a good relationship with Congress, and not just an economist. The official announcement came after Haddad represented Lula in a meeting with FEBRABAN, which is the Federation of Banks here in Brazil, at the end of November. At the time, bankers and executives like a part of the Haddad's statements at the meeting. They like the part that where he said that the tax reform would be a priority this year, but it didn't like the lack of details about the new spending cap rules that we already knew that the government was planning to present. That day, the Brazilian stock index, the Ibovespa, fell more than 2.5%, and the US dollar rose against the Brazilian real. At the day of the announcement, the index rose, but because the choice was already priced by the market. By then, everybody knew that Haddad would be the chosen one for the position. And what we heard is that in political circles, even among allies in the Workers' Party, he was often described as someone somewhat arrogant or lacking the patience to negotiate. And the funny thing is that what we've seen in the recent months, in the recent weeks, it's the exact opposite of it. There was also a survey by Quest that was carried out in March with top finance executives here in Brazil. So they heard, they always hear around 80 to 90 top executives here in Brazil. And this survey pointed that 10% of them approved Haddad. Then in May, in another round of this survey, this rate rose to 26%. By then, the fiscal framework, the proposal from the government had already been presented, and the discussions of the tax reform were already underway. So things were changing, along the time.
Yes, and I remember in that transition time, Lula often said that he always criticized the Brazil's golden rule, which is a rule that prevents the government from increasing its debt for it to pay for costs. Only it allows only Brazil to increase debt for investments. And he said that his golden rule was to eradicate hunger. So a lot of people saw that as a beacon of totally uncontrolled spending, which did not necessarily materialize, at least not in the 6 months of Lula that we have seen. So you mentioned the fiscal framework was already underway. We have seen inflation cooling down. This week we had the latest consumer price gauge showing that Brazilian official inflation is in line with the government's year-end target. It should not remain that as low as it is now until the end of the year, but it already shows that Brazil may be able to meet its target tolerance band by the end of the year. So we mentioned what were the main reasons behind this perception change? Because as you pointed out, almost nobody liked Haddad in the financial markets. And now, I mean, he is by far the most approved of Lula's cabinet members. A lot of people in the financial markets have more faith in him than in the government overall. So what has happened for Haddad's perception of Haddad to change that much?
Yes, so yesterday, the same survey that we were talking about, they released a third round of the poll with this top finance executives, and then we saw Haddad's approval rate risen again to 65% now in July. And what analysts are saying is that he is the main reason for the improvement of the view of Lula. When we look at the results of the same survey for the government, well, in March, the approval rate was zero. Nobody approved Lula governments back in March. And now this rate rose to 20%. So Haddad would be the main reason for that. Okay, so what has I don't know, made all these top finance executives change their minds? And the answer is a combination of economic factors, including international ones, and also Haddad's performance. I think that, of course, you already mentioned, but the market is really optimistic about the tax reform, and somewhat optimistic, not so much, but somewhat optimistic with the new fiscal framework, which will set the rules for the government spending in the next years. And the way that Haddad managed to negotiate these two proposals with Congress, with governors too. You know, we had last week this tough moment with governors that they were afraid of the tax reform because this tax reform in some way it ends the autonomy of the states in elaborating and issuing taxes. So this was a reason for concern and conflict between governments and state governments and the federal government, and Haddad sit with them, sit with governments and negotiate it. So I think that this is the part that we can credit to Haddad's performance. And the other thing is the economy itself. I mean, the economy is much better than the global institutions were projecting by the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023. We have Chinese demand stronger than expected, boosting world trade, especially Brazilian exports. The risk of recession in global powerhouses, as the US itself or Europe, is also lower than it was before. It's still there, it still exists, but it's lower. And we had Brazilian agribusiness boosting the economy in the first quarter with 1.9% over the last quarter of 2022, which was well above market expectations. So all this optimism about the Brazilian economy also kind of helps boost finance ministers' approval rating, and also helps the evaluation of the Lula government.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to perform if conditions are on your side. And I mean, you mentioned some conditions in terms of Chinese demand and the lower risk of global recession. Another thing that I'd like to point out that we have explored in on July the 13th newsletter is the fact that U.S. inflation has also cooled down a lot, and U.S. inflation impacts directly the Brazilian economy, all emerging economies, but Brazilian economy as well, because policy decisions by the Fed may affect the inflow of investors, investment to Brazil. So when the U.S. has higher policy rates, dollars just leave, Brazil starts bleeding dollars. So I mean, Lula is a lucky son of a gun if you think about it, because he took office the first time in 2003, just before a commodities boom, and now he's actually taking office again at a time when things are improving. I mean, there's no commodities boom at this time right now, but the global economy is in much better shape than it was like 1-2 years ago. So would it be fair to say, circling back to Haddad, that this improved perception of his work is also part of it is also due to a correction of these overblown concerns? Because the same survey you mentioned also shows that investors are still crediting these international conditions more for the current situation. So it's like, okay, it's not only him, but maybe we were chasing ghosts at the beginning of the year, at the turn of 2022?
Yes, I mean, they were too pessimistic about everything, and now things, I don't know, got better. So yes, they do believe that the international conditions and the economic conditions as a whole has improved, and so things are better. First because of it, and then second because of Haddad. I think that the overall valuation is that. And also in the survey, we see that when we see the approval rate for the president of the central bank too. So he's, I mean, he has
who is criticized by the government day in, day out, because Brazil's policy rate remains at a 5-year high, 13.75%, which should come down next month, right?
Yes, in August, everybody is expecting this cut because inflation is coming down, and everything is going, has, I don't know, has, the conditions are set for a cut in August. And what I was saying before is that the approval rate of the chair of the central bank also shows that the market is really paying attention in the international conditions, because they do believe that although high, the 13.75% interest rate was necessary and therefore they approve the performance of the central bank so far, which is the opposite opinion of the government right now. So I think that, well, the economy as a whole is a good surprise now at the first half of the year.
Now, before we continue, let's just like a quick reminder to our viewers, please subscribe to the Brazilian Report. It is the engine of our journalistic work, and it helps us to keep our website independent and running and bringing up sharp analysis and different scoops every now and then. Also, if you are already subscribed, then you can do the second best thing, which is to go to Buy Me a Coffee and buy one of our journalists a cup of coffee. You can also join our Buy Me a Coffee memberships and actually have your name called on our podcast. Also, you get all sorts of exclusive content. So you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report, or right next to Fabiane, there is a QR code. You can flash that QR code that will take you directly to our Buy Me a Coffee page, and you can see all of its features there. So buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report. Now, Fabi, let's talk about, we were talking about these fears that the market have of Lula. And I mean, you like him or hate him, I think it is unfair to portray Lula as this red boogeyman that a lot of investors think. I mean, his rhetoric may seem inflamed at times, but actually, I mean, Lula is not a novelty. So we have a body of work of 8 years of his presidency, throughout which he was very, very moderate, to the point that people in the far left criticize him a little bit. I mean, he was, of course, approved by the left entirely, but some people in the far left had their digs at his administration. Market analysts, they always like to describe themselves as facts over feelings people. And actually, I don't think that they are, as, in the case of Brazilian politics, which begs the question, is their information diet wrong? I mean, are they like too involved with it? When we compare how international investors see Brazil and see Lula, we see a major discrepancy. Is it because the fact that international investors are not living Brazil, so they may have a more detached approach, which may be more objective? I mean, why do you think that we have this? Okay, surely leftist president, but by any means a moderate, being pictured by many as the sort of tropical incarnation of Karl Marx.
Yes, and even if we compare to his counterparts, right, here in Latin America, he's really moderated. So, yes, I think that maybe domestic analysts, they are not so facts over feelings as they think they are. And what we see every day is not Lula's inflamed statements at times, but also I think that his allies, the statements of his political allies, not only his ministers, but the people from the Workers' Party, for example, the chairwoman of the Workers' Party, Liz Hoffman, is a really, it seems to be not really, but when she talks like an anti-market leader. So I think that all this helps, with this kind of fear of Lula or leftist measures. We recently had leaders, and we report that here at the Brazilian Report, of the 9 parties of the president's coalition, asking the Senate to open an investigation on into the central bank head Roberto Campos Neto, because they say that he has delayed the interest rate cuts, has the decision depended on him, alone, and we know that this is not the case. We know that since Lula took office, his allies have been bashing the central bank, which, as we mentioned before, is well approved and evaluated by the market. So this kind of tension, doesn't help. On the other hand, the market, I think, is right about the concerns around the fiscal framework. We already showed that here at the Brazilian Report. We had our columnist, Luciano Sobral, writing about that the fiscal framework is not really an anchor, doesn't stop the government from spending, and the fact that the government gave no signs that it intends to cut spending, because, on the contrary, Lula has been talking about incentives programs, first for the automotive industry. Now he's talking about also lowering taxes for appliances, home appliances, and other kind of manufacturing sectors. So the track record of Lula kind of demystified this aura he tries to impose as an anti-market leader. But the current concern with government spending and the fact that the primary surplus targets that Haddad promised within this proposal will only come if there is an increase in collection, an increase in revenue is real. This concern is real and it's justified.
And to your point, because Luciano Sobral, in a few of his op-eds on the Brazilian Report, he said that for the fiscal framework to work, Brazil will need successive years of trade surplus, and that only happened in a sustainable way during a massive boom of commodities, which is not where the global economy is at the moment, right?
Yes. So the revenue must come from other sources, and we have seen Haddad trying to find these other sources and trying to pass other bills or modifications concerning tax and collection, and
and also because the government and the government has said that it will not raise taxes. So actually, this effort by Haddad is almost like trying to get to look underneath the sofa cushions to just try to find money that you may have left along the way, and is actually trying to see where the money tap is leaking without actually creating new levies, without raising any rates, which is a massive challenge right now.
Yes, and I don't know if at some point on the way, if the government will start talking about cutting spending, like any kind of spending. We didn't hear anything about this until now. So let's see. But the thing is, the new spending cap rules still need pass the lower house, because they were changed in the Senate, and then they need to pass through the lower house of Congress again. Then we have the tax reform vote in the Senate, which will take at least 2 months. The senator that is the rapporteur of the bill already said that. So we will have the bill returning to the House in October for a final vote, maybe, probably. So the reasons that led the market to be enthusiastic about Haddad so far, they haven't had an outcome yet. They haven't passed through Congress yet. So we will still have to wait and see how much Haddad performance will really help Lula's economic policy. Yeah, exactly.
By the way, the fiscal framework is now at the House, which and the tax reform is at the Senate. The senators should change some of the provisions that the House approved, which would send the tax reform bill back to the House, and actually the proposal will ping pong between the two chambers until they agree on one single core tax. Congress is entering a recess tomorrow, so all of these discussions will happen in August. So that's when we're going to see, that's when push will come to shove. Fabi, I know for sure that we're going to keep our eyes on it. So, I mean, see you next time, which will not be in very long because we have a lot of agenda points regarding the economy. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you very much, and we will be explaining, I mean, the details of this proposal, I think, in the coming weeks before the discussion in the Senate. So we will talk a lot about this tax reform.
And by the way, people can go to Brazilian.report to check Fabiane's text on the state of the tax reform right now, where she explains that it will surely make the Brazilian tax code much, much simpler, but still doesn't mean it will be simple. It's going to remain a challenge for taxpayers, but a much less daunting one. So you can go to Brazilian.report/subscribe to get access to Fabiane's text. If you have already subscribed to the Brazilian Report, go to buymeacoffee.com/Brazilian Report, and actually you can further help our newsrooms to grow and to keep doing the excellent work we have for these almost 6 years. Thank you very much for the people who are already subscribing to our content, who are already supporting us on Buy Me a Coffee, because they are helping independent journalism. It is made by humans, which it's going to be less and less the case with AI. It is made by Brazilians and Latin Americans, and it is an insider's look into what is going on in Brazil and Latin America. Fabi, thank you one more time, and see you next time to discuss the Brazilian economy. Have a good one.